Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sorry about the delay. So we'll begin very briefly again with the psalm for the full and speedy recovery of Rabbi Steinsaltz, the author of our book 45, dedicated to speech 2, and then we'll go right back. Okay, so we'll delve right back into the chapter of Torah that we're in. Folded the page right. That means page 72 begins this dance of life in Judaism. Bottom of page 72. So basically the big idea, and then we'll jump right into it, but the big idea that Rabbi Steinsaltz here was speaking about is that the study of Torah at its best when it's translated into action, and in a way, by concretizing the teachings of the Torah, what we are doing is we are not just making a change in the moment in which that happens, or even in the place in which that happens, but really in the cosmic world that we live in, because the world as it is in its basic form is very materialistic. Torah is says it's not just from heaven, it is heaven, and bringing the study of the Torah to this world really merges this world and the next, which is really the union that existed, the union of this world and the next. It was a union that existed before the sin of Adam and Eve, before the time in which they ate from the tree of knowledge. So each time we bring Torah down to this world with a good deed, with a mitzvah, we are really bringing back the world to its primordial state, as he calls it, as Rabbi Steinsaltz calls it, and really turning earth into heaven. So that's really the idea, and that's what he calls now this dance of life, that by focusing on mitzvot, we are not just doing individual acts, but really in essence we're doing collective acts that affect the entire world. All right, so that's the idea. Let's go down now to page 72. Does anyone want to read? Right, so just to explain this, I want to deviate just a little bit, but there's a beautiful take on the term that God gave us as we received the Torah on Mount Sinai. God called us Am Segula, which is often translated, or maybe even mistranslated, as the chosen nation. Am Segula does not mean the chosen nation. Am Segula means the nation of Segula. What is Segula? Segula sometimes translated as royal. By the way, it's interesting because Sagol in Hebrew is purple, and purple, they say, is the color of royalty. So therefore, I think this term is translated as the royal nation, even though the literal translation is the purple nation, Am Segula. But it's translated in many, many ways. There's one take on it, which is a Kabbalistic take, and that is that really Am Segula comes from the word Sagol, which is one of the vowels in Hebrew. Sagol is that vowel that has 3 dots, that turns a letter into E, right? So those 3 dots, you see it everywhere. But what's interesting is that when God called us Am Segula, what he was teaching us is that we have to be a part of those 3 dots that are intrinsically connected, that are forever connected. What are those 3 points that are connected? And again, it's Kabbalistic, which is really based on the Zohar. This Kabbalistic take says that it is Torah Israel, Eretz Israel, and Am Israel. What does it mean? The Torah of Israel, the nation of Israel, and the land of Israel. These 3 are forever connected. And whenever these 3 join, literally speaking, right? Practically speaking, when they join in this world, there is this cosmic dance that Rabbi Steinsaltz speaks about that happens. Why? Because by joining these 3, each time a Jew studies Torah, and especially when you study Torah in Israel, right? Again, referring to those 3 points, then there is this connection that really triggers the essential connection or the essential root from which we come from, the Shekhinah itself. It's almost like the Shekhinah coming alive. Each time you do that, it creates a flame that inflames the whole connection, these 3 things. I think that's why, Erica, I'll take your question in just a second, but I think that's why when you receive an aliyah, I don't know, I've received many aliyahs, but something happens, something is triggered, you always feel nervous. When you go to Israel, if you ever go to Israel, you feel like Elie Wiesel puts it beautifully. He says, each time it feels like I've always belonged here, or this is my home, as he puts it. It could be the first time in 20 years, but you go there and there's this immediate connection, this immediate click that others might not feel. Why? Because these 3 are intrinsically connected. Eretz Israel, Torah Israel, and Am Israel. And each time these connections happen, almost like in electricity, each time you put the positive and negative together, then the light bulb goes on. Year 2, each time you connect these three, something goes on. We just came from the holiday of Passover, but one of the prayers is, Ata b'chaltanu mikol ha'amim, ahavta otanu v'atzita banu. You have chosen us from all the nations. God says himself in Deuteronomy that he took a nation from other nations. Lakachet lo goy mikerev goy. But if we want to go into this a little bit, I don't know if we've spoken about this in the past, but chosen nation is also misunderstood because we don't understand the term choice. Choice is a term that we cannot relate to so much because we barely make any choices in life. The choices that we think we make, the choices that we think are choices, are not choices. They're preferences. So if someone tells me, do you want an apple juice or do you want an orange juice? If I say orange juice, it's not because I chose the orange juice over the apple juice. It's because I have so many things in me that are wired in me, psychologically, genetically, however you wish to look at it, that will pull me to the direction of the orange juice over the apple juice. And if I really didn't choose the orange juice over the apple juice, I preferred it because my disposition is built in a way that it prefers the orange juice. Genetic one again, the biological one, the psychological one, or the educational one, the environmental one, depending on whether you follow Karl Marx or Sigmund Freud or whatever it is. But there's always something that pulls you to the orange juice direction over the apple juice. So it's not a choice. It's a preference. Even when you decide, should I become a lawyer or a doctor, even that's not a choice. Again, that's a preference. All choices that we think are choices are not choices. They're preferences. So what is a choice? And Hasidic teachings speak a lot about this. What is a choice? When God chose us, what does that mean? When we said the prayer during the Passover holiday, you chose us. What does that mean? What is a choice? A choice can only happen between two identical things. Otherwise, again, it's a preference. I prefer the color red over the color blue. I prefer orange juice over this. I prefer becoming a doctor over But if you have two identical things, you can't have that preference kick in. You can't have the genetic position kick in. It's the same thing that you're choosing from. That's when choice happens, right? So I have two identical water bottles right here, and I choose one over the other. If they were both full, now one is empty. So I might have something in me inclining me towards empty bottles. But if they were both full, then I would say, okay, that's a choice. Yeah. That's not a preference. Oh, 2 chocolates. There you go. 2 identical. Now I can choose the right over the left. That's a choice. But even though they're not completely, the wrinkles are different. but anyhow, so when we say God chose us, it's interesting to note, let us not think that that's because we're better. Oh, we're better. No. That's right. That's right. It's really completely random. That's what a choice is. Otherwise, it's a preference. But on the other hand, also, that's why the connection is stronger in essence. And that's what Hasidic teachings dwell on when they speak about the chosen nation. Yes, God chose us from other nations. Not because he preferred us. Not because we are better. Again, the verse in the Deuteronomy says, Lakachet lo goy mikerev goy. Chose a nation from another nation. The nations like we're all the same. Nation from another nation. But on the other hand, when you choose something like that with no reason, that's when the choice is really creates the strongest bond. Why? Because if I choose this purple chocolate over this blue chocolate, right, which is really a preference, whatever triggers my decision of choosing purple, if those factors are not there anymore, say purple, whatever, this is not a good example, but say I choose one person over the other. Whatever made me prefer that person, if those things are not there anymore in that person, the connection will get lost. It's almost like what we spoke about regarding love. If I love a person because I prefer his nose and his eyes and his ears, if that person gets into an accident and I chose that person, I preferred it. I preferred it because of those reasons. And if those reasons are not there anymore, then my connection will stop. It's an excellent question. But who says that morality has to come from choice? It might just come from fine-tuning your preferences and from working on them. The preferences, the inclinations that are good should be developed. That Yetzer HaTov, as we call it, right, that good inclination, should be boosted in a person. But I think the more you develop that good inclination, you're right, at the start of it, but the more you develop the good inclination, because a lot of it also doesn't come from genetic disposition. It comes from education. The more you educate yourself to really train this good inclination, I think the more that preference will be easier.
Okay.
But it's true that sometimes it's an unfair game.
Right.
Not everyone starts at the same point. Yeah, and how you look at the reality, in psychology they call it's cognitive, right? Yeah, I'm just thinking of Alex White, who was just here at the Holocaust survivor. One of his 3 lessons was that something of that magnitude happens to you, and I don't think anyone here has ever experienced something, and we should never experience something of that magnitude as he experienced the Holocaust. But doesn't mean, like he just said, right? Doesn't mean you heard him. Doesn't mean you should commit suicide. No, you have to use that in order to be of something to society. Because if there's so many people that are indifferent and there's so much evil, that just increases your responsibility to be good, to fight that. And in a way, I think it's right. Not everyone, life isn't fair. The word fair doesn't exist in Hebrew. In Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, they just say fair. They love fair. They use the English word. It doesn't, because we're not after fairness. We don't believe that life is fair. That's fine. But that's God's department. That's how He created it. So we have different starting points. So some people will have to work on the good inclination much more. For others, it will come naturally. But we still have to develop that good inclination. Yes. After the choice happens, you can, if that thing has a soul, is an entity of its own, right? Then you can develop a relationship and really like it more and more, prefer it more and more. So if I choose between these 2 chocolates again, I choose this one. If this one had somewhat of a personality, then maybe I could develop this relationship and then eventually make me prefer it over this, because now it's grown into something else, which is more or less what can happen with the Jewish nation. But we have to remember that at the very core, we were chosen not because we were better, because we were preferred, because we were chosen, because we are identical. Well, yeah, I know people ask that question, which is she. That's fine. He's got a he, he's got a she. Well, yeah, I think he's got an it. Well, I'll tell you what, God calls himself a he in the Torah. Oh. That's how he refers to himself. Vayedaber, not vatedaber. Vayedaber Hashem b'nei Israel. He refers to himself as a he. So we ought not take that away from him. Why would I choose this over this? I don't know. If there was a reason, it would be a preference. In choices, there are no reasons. But that, on the other hand, again, is what makes the connection so much more powerful. Because if I choose this, and now we have a relationship that is not based on reason, then this connection will forever remain. The second thing is that we chose God. Now, God chose us. And after we chose us, in fact, that's how they time it chronologically, then God went to every nation and said, 1 second, do you want to receive this Torah? And they said, well, does it say do not murder because we love murdering? God said yes. They said, we're not interested. And he went to another nation, do not commit adultery, or we love committing adultery, so we don't want it, and so on and so forth, until the Jewish people said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. And that's when we chose the Torah and we chose God thereby. But it's interesting because you also find that duality, it's kind of an oxymoron if you think about it, right? Because God chose us and then we had to choose Him again. But after we said Na'aseh v'nishma, it says Vayishvu Yisrael b'tachtit ha'ar, that Israel was at the bottom of the mountain. The Talmud points out, why does it say at the bottom of the mountain? B'tachtit ha'ar, because they weren't at the bottom of the mountain; they were around the mountain, right? And the Talmud asks that question: what does it mean b'tachtit ha'ar? And what Talmud says is that God picked up the mountain, and as it says, kafa alehem har kegigit, He forced them. He said, if you receive this Torah, great, I'll leave you alone. Otherwise, I'll crush you by making this mountain fall on your heads. So then we said, okay, we're going to be receiving this mountain. But if you follow again the chronological events, then we already accepted the Torah. What does God want from us? Does God... what do you want from? We said yes. Well, you don't have to make the show of taking the mountain over. But that goes back really to the root of our relationship with God. And I think it's at the root of every relationship with our spouses, with our friends, and so on. on the one hand, there is a part of us that wants to be in a relationship. We love our spouses because they're kind and they're good and they whatever it may be. We love our friends also because of all their good qualities and so on. But on the other hand, that shouldn't be the basis of our relationship. Because if that's the basis of our relationship, then it's not a relationship. It's a selfish relationship. It's an ego-centered relationship. I love you for what you bring me, for the kindness you bring me, for the God. That's not the relationship. So the relationship should not be because or based of these qualities that I find good in you. They should be in spite of these qualities that I find good in you. And when there's no reason for a relationship, that's when there's a relationship. When I love you just because, that's when I love you. If I love you because of what you bring to me, I don't love you, I love me. And that's what God was trying to achieve with those two phases. On the one hand, he said, you know what? Fine, you get involved. But on the other hand, don't base your preference of me, God, don't choose me because I bring you so much ethic and so much moral and so. No. You choose me as I chose you. For no reason. And if we can have a relationship like that, if you can just say, you know what, I'm with you, God, no matter what. Even if you're about to bring a mountain on top of me, I'm with you. Then the relationship can thrive. Right. There has to be some spice, some salt and pepper that make it a little flavory. But that shouldn't be, I should be eating the salad with salt or without salt. It doesn't matter. Exactly. And that just enhances this point. That sometimes even if there's no reason, we just have to let go and still be there in that relationship, because that's really what should constitute the relationship. That's why, again, when you go to Israel, when you study Torah, there's a spark there. And when you meet another Jew, there's a spark there. And that, I think, goes back to this Am Segula. Just want to conclude, and I apologize for the short class today, but I want to conclude because tonight and tomorrow, and that's why we had a Holocaust survivor year, is Yom HaShoah. And or in Israel, it's also known as Yom HaShoah VaGvura. And I don't know how that word just fell off in English, because it should be noted that it's Yom HaShoah VaGvura, which means the day of heroism too. We should be celebrating not just the Holocaust, commemorating the Holocaust, but also the tremendous Gvura, the tremendous heroism of these Holocaust survivors and those who sacrificed, the 6 million who sacrificed their lives. But speaking of that, I think that it's well connected as we enter this somber day. We ought to remember that our connection with God and our connection with each other is a connection that is even beyond tragedy, even beyond genocide. And it's a connection that, as the Prophet says, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, that is eternal. The eternity of Israel will not lie. Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. And it's a connection, therefore, that we ought to develop and enhance in our own lives. Each time we study Torah, each time we go to Israel, each time we meet another Jew, we should have that flame come alive, because that is really that's the only thing that's eternal in our life. Okay, we'll have a class immediately next week instead of waiting 2 weeks, if that's okay. And that means on May 8th, right? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.